Now, the Three Martini Lunch with Greg Corombos and Jim Geraghty.
And welcome, everyone, to the Monday edition of the Three Martini Lunch, along with Jim Geraghty of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. We have good, bad, and crazy martinis for conservatives today. We're coming at you a little bit later than usual as we stuck around to hear the presser after the Trump-Putin summit in Finland. And after the Three Martinis today, Jim and I are going to solve one of the greatest dilemmas that still exists in popular culture that got a new bit of controversy over the weekend. So we're going to address that as well. Just as important as all the other martinis today, I'm sure. Jim, let's start with the good martini, courtesy of the New York Times. But the story comes from California. 6 weeks after winning an overwhelming victory among California primary voters, Senator Dianne Feinstein suffered an embarrassing setback Saturday night as the state Democratic Party officially endorsed her rival for election this November. Kevin De Leon, the Democratic leader in California's state Senate, won the support of the party leadership despite an effort by Ms. Feinstein to convince the party not to offer an endorsement. The vote for Mr. De Leon reflected the rise of younger liberal activists in the California Democratic leadership, some of whom regard Ms. Feinstein as a moderate compared with the intensely progressive voices who are coming up through the party ranks. These activists tend to be younger and more left-leaning than the state party at large. So, Jim, I guess when Joe Crowley's not far enough left for you got to have Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez as the legitimate liberal / socialist in that race. I guess we get results like this out in California where Dianne Feinstein, who I don't know what her liberal rating is, but if you look at her on issues from abortion to size of government and certainly to guns, it's hard to see how she's a moderate in anything.
Yeah. Anytime Democrats are fighting with each other, that's one of our good martinis. Yes. It's really kind of fascinating. The idea that Dianne Feinstein would be seen as one of the moderates in the Senate caucus or amongst Democrats shows you how much the center of the party has shifted. I mean, there was a time not that long. When I say not that long ago, I should say quite long ago, where if you were rattling off really liberal senators, she would come up not too far after, Ted Kennedy, Patrick Leahy, maybe you throw out Merkley or somebody from the Pacific Northwest. But I'm going to make a weird moment in which I'm not going to say that the lefties have a point, Greg, or that I'm rooting for the farther left corner of the party. I'm just going to observe Dianne Feinstein is 85.
Yes. We
make jokes about old senators a lot on this podcast, but even by the standards of old senators, she's really old. And need I remind you, Senate terms are 6 years. At some point, it's time to hang it up. If they don't let you drive at that age, if they don't let you fly planes at that age, do we really want you legislating at that age? I'll concede the point to the far lefties. Yeah, maybe it's time for some new blood out there in California. Barbara Boxer hung it up a couple terms ago, and man, I really enjoy pointing this out. That for those of you who are familiar with the creepy, unnerving, horrific tale of Jim Jones in Jonestown, he was very active in San Francisco politics before the horrific end of his group / cult. And she was San Francisco supervisor in early 70s to 78, then mayor of San Francisco. Dianne Feinstein was very plugged in with that crowd. So like when the history books are full of references to you, maybe it's time to hang it up, and it's time to ride off into the sunset for that stuff. So, again, not really an endorsement of Kevin De Leon, just an observation that you can just think about an entire generation of California Democrats who've watched their dreams die of running for Senate because she would just never leave the office. So at least in that sense, I guess it's good to see an incumbent getting challenged and, in fact, getting some grief when they've been in office since 1992, Greg.
Yes, exactly. And in city politics since the early 70s. By the way, if you're a part of our senior listening demographic, I love you. And I think you can do whatever you want to do.
We love you. Yes, you people are fine. It's those old senators we have a problem with, unless it's one we like.
Exactly. Interestingly, though, I'm sure the age did play into it, but the official explanation was that she was too moderate. So when it comes up to these young, really aggressive, accept no weasel words on any issue, young progressive / socialists, I guess, Jim, you could say the dogma lives loudly within them.
Ah, very good. That'll be her legacy. I've seen people with T-shirts. It sounds like the sort of thing, an accusation that quite a few Christians would kind of like, all right, I'll wear that on my sleeve. Let the dogma live loudly within you. But in the end, Greg, isn't it just kind of like, old people to complain about those loud rackets? Yeah. Turn down that dogma. You know what hour it is? I have to go to my 4:00 dinner.
All right, let's move on to our bad martini now. It's a little bit of a double-barreled, but as we mentioned, we stuck around to not record until the Trump-Putin press conference was over following their meeting in Helsinki, Finland. And as expected, a lot of the questioning after their opening statements had to do with the allegations and now indictments related to Russian meddling in the 2016 election. So one of the questions was, hey, President Trump, all of your intelligence agencies that have conclusively reported on this have said that Russia did this. We've now got the indictments. Putin says he didn't do it. So who do you believe, and will you denounce him here and now and tell him not to do it again? And here was Trump's response.
All I can do is ask the question. My people came to me, Dan Coates came to me, and some others. They said they think it's Russia. I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this. I don't see any reason why it would be, but I really do want to see the server. But I have confidence in both parties. I really believe that this will probably go on for a while, but I don't think it can go on without finding out what happened to the server. What happened to the servers of the Pakistani gentlemen that worked on the DNC? Where are those servers? They're missing. Where are they? What happened to Hillary Clinton's emails? 33,000 emails gone, just gone. I think in Russia they wouldn't be gone so easily. I think it's a disgrace that we can't get Hillary Clinton's 33,000 emails. So I have great confidence in my intelligence people, but I will tell you that President Putin was extremely strong and powerful in his denial today.
So the equivocation there is not too good, Jim. I think there is a good question. Why wouldn't the DNC let the FBI have access to the server when it was investigating it? But this idea of, I don't know why Russia would want to do it, doesn't look good, certainly, and possibly worse than that.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things come up. The first of all is, if you're Dan Coates, do you stay on the job? Right? I mean, your job is to inform the president and that you give him the straight answer, and what he does with that answer is up to him. But your job is to, Mr. President, I represent the intelligence community, all of our groups. This is the best information we have. These are the best analysts we have. This is what we got. If he goes up there and he says, yeah, I don't know if I believe him or not. The Russian president says no. And it was a really strong – Trump picks the worst adjectives, doesn't he? I want to say it's a vehement denial or an okay, fine, but it was a strong and powerful denial. He's not a superhero. So anyway, that's really bad. As we are having this conversation, Greg, I see that Abby Huntsman, the former MSNBC host and talking head, she's currently a Fox News anchor, who is the daughter of John Huntsman, former governor of Utah, who's actually our current U.S. ambassador to Russia. Tweeted out, no negotiation is worth throwing your own people and country under the bus. So I'm guessing a really awkward Thanksgiving at the Huntsman household later this year. Look, this was a bad press conference. This was a bad summit. This went badly. And I know, already getting some pushback on Twitter. But as I pointed out, because in the Morning Jolt we saw, I wrote about how, look, Russia's done a lot of bad things. And we don't have to go back to the Soviet days or, No, this is fairly recent. The past couple of years, we can come up with some bad things Russia's done. Shooting down the Malaysian jetliner, and I know they keep insisting, oh no, it was the Ukrainians or it was a UFO or no, the Malaysian jetliner shot down over Ukraine was by Russian-aligned rebels who want to take part of Ukraine, join Russia. It was a Russian military system they used, and as many people have pointed out, a Boeing 777 does not look like any other military jet. So two possibilities. Either this was shot down by militants who were deliberately targeting a passenger airliner, basically terrorists, or the Russian military put this kind of anti-aircraft weapon in the hands of idiots who can't tell the difference between passenger airliners and Ukrainian fighter jets and things like that. Either scenario is really, really bad, and I believe Russia is pretty much morally culpable and responsible for that. Yeah, let's put aside the Russian hacking, right? Let's just clearly Trump's got a real sore spot about that. Fine, you've got Crimea, You've got Georgia. You've got the efforts in Syria, the fact that Russian mercenaries took shots at American troops back there not that long ago. You've got all the efforts they've put to try to defend Assad. If you have any doubts about what Russia's doing in the world and their various aggressions and violations of international law and things like that, there's a very bright woman up in New York named Nikki Haley, who's our ambassador to the United Nations, and she can tell you all about this stuff. And if Trump had mentioned any one of these things in the press conference with Putin, I think that would have turned a lot of heads. I think a lot of it was like, that would have done a lot to pour water on this raging fire of the collusion narrative and the idea that Trump has some sort of blackmail material on Putin. Like, I'm generally skeptical of, but when he goes out and really doesn't speak a single critical word of Putin the entire time, and really indicates very little criticism of any Russian policy anywhere in the world, it pours a lot of gasoline onto that fire. It really was a wide variety of folks are looking at this and really kind of appalled by the president's performances. This is very bizarre because he talks about what a tough guy he is. Now it's America first and all that kind of stuff. Putin goes out there and basically completely denies all of these allegations and all this kind of stuff, and basically gives Putin has got to be walking out of this summit with the biggest smile on his face imaginable. He got exactly what he wanted. And the work of the American intelligence community and lots of other folks really got poo-pooed by the president. And that was not what any responsible president would have done in that situation. It was a really bad summit. And I think we're going to be, the ramifications of this will be playing out for a couple of weeks.
And I think we understand a little better from this press conference, and I think we already knew this, why Trump resists anything in this investigation, not just whether his campaign had any connection to it, but whether the Russians tried to meddle on their own. He had one response where he pretty much dismissed it because he said, we won this campaign because I ran a brilliant campaign. He thinks that anything that shows any nefarious intention by the Russians suggests that somehow the legitimacy of his win is in question, even if his campaign is not found to have any connection to it whatsoever. And that is his big mistake.
Yeah, what's kind of fascinating is that, if you had said, I guess that's the thing is that because the narrative, the argument is, Donald Trump worked with a nefarious and aggressive Russian government to influence the elections and to win the election. Trump objects to every word in there, including nefarious and aggressive Russian government. I've wondered whether this is a little bit of envy on Trump's part, that he sees Putin as a guy who's really got his country locked down and squared away and taken care of. When he snaps his fingers and everybody he says jump and everybody else asks how high, that Trump has a certain amount of you keep hearing the jokes about man crush or something like that. Whether Trump kind of admires Putin on some level, it is really striking to have this after the NATO summit and the G8 summit, or the G7 summit, in how much Trump will just get really in the faces of traditional U.S. allies over trade disputes and things that traditionally have been able to get worked out without putting the overall alliance or overall relationship at risk. But you put him in a room with Kim Jong-un or with Vladimir Putin, and all of a sudden it's all smiles and backslapping and happy talk. Look, Trump had the ability to put out a lot of these fires, so to speak, and he chose not to today. And I think that I kind of wonder how many people around him, working for him, who have a much more traditional, shall we say, understanding of Russia, are baffled by how this by his stance and his entire tone this entire summit.
And just a quick follow-up, the Democrats not exactly distinguishing themselves on this either. Chris Coons of Delaware, first elected in 2010, went on Fox News Sunday yesterday before the summit and said that President Trump absolutely had to bring up Crimea and confront Putin over the annexation of Crimea, which happened in 2014, of course, when Barack Obama was president. Here's what Coons said.
I would support our reducing sanctions on Russia, allowing them to rejoin G8 if they took the steps they must take to withdraw their forces from eastern Ukraine, to undo the illegal annexation of Crimea, but to simply waive that, to say it is somehow all Obama's fault and let's move forward, would be to weaken our vital allies in Europe who have joined us in sustaining tough sanctions against Russia. I commend President Trump for the steps he has taken, but to simply wave this off as Obama's fault misses the vital historical context here. President Putin is the first Russian leader since Stalin to expand their territory. We can't allow this to go unchallenged.
And Jim, Barack Obama made sure that Russia wasn't part of the G8 anymore. So and he really showed him.
You're out of our club. Yeah, no, I don't disagree with much of what Coons is saying. I'm just curious about where this was 3-4 years ago right. when there was a Democratic president. And, a lot of it. Look, here's the thing. Almost every American president underestimates Russia. We can go back to, George W. Bush saying, I looked into Putin's eyes and I saw his soul. He got a lot of grief for that, and I think he deserved a lot of grief for that. But then, Obama comes into office, and one of the first things Hillary does is the reset button, because the perception amongst the Obama campaign and the Democratic foreign policy establishment was the reason we were having these problems with Russia, remember, was that Condi Rice was too bellicose. There's too much of this cowboy diplomacy. Bush is too much. If we just reach out to the Russians and treat them with more respect, everything will work out better. And lo and behold, it didn't work out that way at all. No, it turns out Russia just sees us as a foe. Romney says they're our biggest geopolitical foe. Obama says, the 80s called. They're calling, asking for their foreign policy back. Like, he scoffs at that. The comment of Medvedev after the election will have more flexibility. The Democrats were not that much better on this. So I guess the question I'm facing now, Craig, is like, if I want a tougher line on Russia, where do I turn? Because I'm going to be told, I need to turn to the Democrats. But I have a memory, Greg. I remember how weak these guys were not that long ago. And everyone's like, there's a bunch. There were all these warning signs about Russian meddling. Obama was president. If there's a foreign power meddling in your domestic politics, that should turn Bruce Banner into the hole. That should really make you angry, and you should be talking about your retaliation and efforts to prevent this and exposing all the evidence, naming the people, show us the evidence, just go out and get those guys. And it was not something that the Obama administration really wanted to pursue. And for a good portion of that second term, the overriding priority in foreign policy was the Iran deal, and because Russia was a party to the Iran deal, we didn't want to antagonize them too much. And you end up with a circumstance in which we basically let Russia run roughshod for 4 years. Trump takes over, and then a bunch of Democrats want to get tough on him. Now, look, I agree with them that we should be getting tough on him. I've been saying this for years and years, but it reeks of political opportunism and makes us really doubt if the Democrats ever got in power again, whether they really would take a tougher line with Russia than they have in the past. Color me skeptical.
All right, let's move on to our Crazy Martini now, Jim, and we go to the PBS show Firing Line, which claims to be the intellectual successor to William F. Buckley's Firing Line. I don't think that Margaret Hoover, as nice and sure as talented as she is ever going to be confused with William F. Buckley. If you watch this episode that she had with New York congressional candidate Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who we mentioned a little bit in the first martini, they had about a half-hour conversation. They talked about her victory in the New York City primary. They talked a little bit about what she means when she talks about democratic socialism, and it's kind of what we've talked about ever since we found her on the political map a few weeks back. But then the issue came. Margaret Hoover brought up Ocasio-Cortez calling Israel occupiers of the Palestinians. And here's how the next almost minute went.
Well, yes, but I also think that what people are starting to see, at least in the occupation of Palestine, is just an increasing crisis of humanitarian condition. And that, to me, is just where I tend to come from on this issue.
You use the term the occupation of Palestine. What did you mean by that?
I think what I meant is like the settlements that are increasing in some of these areas and places where Palestinians are experiencing difficulty in access to their housing and homes.
Do you think you can expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd also I am not the expert on geopolitics on this issue.
No, you can't actually expand on that, apparently. Jim, this would obviously be bigger news if she was a conservative, but what do you make of her extraordinarily limited knowledge of this issue?
Greg, as I wrote in the Morning Jolt today, if elected, she would be a 28-year-old congresswoman, and that's, it's really extraordinary. It's very rare. In fact, Greg, maybe it's rare for a reason. No offense to our having made fun of our old people. Maybe we'll make fun of young people, and Jim will. Everyone will say, "Boy, Jim's in a cranky mood this Monday." Anybody who's not within a certain age range, but look, Hoover's off to a good start. I think actually as host, if you can generate this kind of a headline, kind of of an interview. So I want to give everybody involved in the firing line, look, it's a huge shoes to fill, and good luck to them. I think it's a tough thing to pull off in the modern era with the attention span to have half-hour interview shows. This is what happens when you have the time for people to go beyond that soundbite answer. And for some folks, they're not going to have much beyond that soundbite answer, which is fine. Look, everybody kind of getting up to speed on different issues. It was kind of striking to hear the rising star and the future of the Democratic Party get asked what strikes me as a fairly mundane question, or basically, you just made a fairly big accusation against Israel. Care to defend that? And she just whiffs, and she just very clearly kind of stammers her way through it, and that's I think revealing that look, she hasn't had time to do the homework, so to speak, hasn't had time to do the reading, get up to speed on that. And on the one hand, while that's understandable and human, and we all make mistakes, two thoughts out of this. One is that this demonstrates that this is not some wonderkind. This is not someone who's wise beyond her years and remarkable, and no, she's going to, in all likelihood, she's going to get elected unless everybody starts writing in, Crowley. But she's going to have some growing to do, and that perhaps the hype around her should die down a little bit, because there's a lot. Members of Congress deal with a lot, and I don't, the average person doesn't have a lot of time to get through and get familiar with all this stuff. And it's perfectly fine to say in some of these interviews, I really want to read more about that. But the whole point is to do that before you say Israel is an occupier of Palestine and all this kind of stuff. Learn before you make the really hot accusation. Just the second observation, Greg, if let's just say a Republican congressional candidate to give it an answer like that, would it be the opening act, opening sketch of Saturday Night Live in the fall, do you think? Or do you think it would be just become a recurring character, somebody impersonating the know-nothing bubble-headed congressional candidate?
If our news cycle was less than about 15 minutes, it probably would be in the opening skit of Saturday Night Live in a couple months. But this is the hype is being stared in the face by reality now, and unsurprisingly, it's not quite meeting up to expectations. All right, let's dig into an ugly crisis here, Jim. We have to solve this. We've been asked to solve this by multiple listeners. Over the weekend, Bruce Willis was roasted. I'm not exactly sure where. And it comes exactly this past weekend. This past Sunday was the 30th anniversary of the wide release of Die Hard, which, of course, is the official movie of this podcast and the greatest action movie, at least in my mind, of all time. And over the weekend, Bruce Willis addressed this. I'm not sure how much alcohol he had before he said this, but he said, Die Hard is not a Christmas movie. It's a bleepity-bleep Bruce Willis movie. And so all these headlines all over the place are saying, Bruce Willis settles the controversy. Die Hard is not a Christmas movie. And so we've got some folks writing in and saying, what say you, Greg Corombos and Jim Geraghty? Well, Jim, I'll let you speak for yourself, but I believe it absolutely is a Christmas movie, with all due respect to Mr. Willis, who obviously made it quite a fun movie and an excellent action movie. The theme of Christmas is there throughout. He's there for Christmas in the movie. Christmas packing materials are playing a critical role in the climactic scene of the movie, which I won't give away, even though it's been 3 decades. And a lot of people say, well, it was released in July. How can you even say that? Well, I took a moment to look up online other movies that were released that have Christmas themes that were released in the summertime. Now, some are, you could say that the debate would continue over things like Trading Places or Gremlins, but also being released in the summertime, Waiting for Santa Claus, Christmas in Connecticut, and my coup de grace here, Miracle on 34th Street. Die Hard is a Christmas movie.
There you go, Greg. I'm going to go in a different direction. I agree with your assessment. I'm glad that Mr. Willis is having fun getting roasted. I'm glad, and he's free to have the opinion he likes. But I do believe that at some point, a work of art, be it a film, you said it was the greatest action movie of all time. Greg, I'm a little disappointed that you're underselling it that way. I believe it is the triumphant work of Western civilization. Our Rosetta Stone, the lodestone of our really just America, but the world, I believe. You can kind of mark history. You talk about antebellum, before the war and after the war. We really look at American history and before Die Hard and after Die Hard. Because since its release date back in 1988, we do Die Harder now, Greg. Yeah. The second thing I'd point out there is that at some point a work gets into the public domain. People look at it, read it, analyze it. watch it. And by the way, you made a reference to the Three Martini Lunch listeners who have not watched Die Hard. For those that are out there, really? Really? We've been making Die Hard jokes in this podcast for years and you still haven't seen it. It's on TNT, like, I believe, every Tuesday. Or, you really have no excuse. But anyway, at some point, an artist can put out work and people love it. They react it. They have very strong reactions. And then the artist can come out and say, well, actually, no, what I meant was X instead of Y, even though lots of people have interpreted. And sometimes it's a little transparent when, Dumbledore was gay. Oh, okay, J.K. Rowling. Yeah, you just totally forgot to mention that in 7 500-page books. Right, got it, no problem. In this case, though, I don't think that Bruce Willis really has the authority to be the final arbiter of this question. I believe it is in the hands of the fans. I don't believe that he can cite other evidence and all that stuff. And the reason, if you doubt that at some point a work of art stops being the territory of the artist, stops being the possession of the artist, and at some point it has to be turned over to those who appreciate it most. I have a one-word answer to anyone who would argue with that, Greg.
What?
Midichlorians. For those who may not recall, because they have had many years of therapy to blot out those memories, after the three original brilliant Star Wars trilogy, George Lucas returns with The Phantom Menace. We were among those who tried to catch those late-night showings back in 1999. And suddenly the Force is because of magic bacteria in your blood. And if by taking a blood test, they can check whether you're strong in the Force. Even though in the first movie, Obi-Wan says the Force is a mystical energy field that connects all living beings. It surrounds us and penetrates us. It's the source of a Jedi's power. Yes, I'm quoting the movie. What's wrong with that? But anyway, that at some point, no, Bruce Willis, it's not your call. It belongs to the fans. And the fans have largely agreed Die Hard is a Christmas movie.
Indeed. Case closed. I think we've won. Thank you for those who wanted our expert opinions. Jim, now that you've scolded those who haven't seen it, I'm not sure which demographic is left unscathed today, but nonetheless.
Both listeners remaining, thank you for being with us.
Talk to you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Geraghty of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today, and be sure to tune in again on Tuesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.